Chapter 15. Pattaya Island. We'd been at sea for nearly a month when we finally glided into the bay of Pattaya Island. It was small, a little emerald bubble floating just above the equator. Technically, Pattaya belonged to Mangkon, one of our first victories in the longest war, but it was the only island in the middle of the Green Sea, which made it a stopping point for anyone traveling between the western and eastern hemispheres. As a result, the tiny island was surrounded by ships. A rainbow of flags from dozens of nations fluttered from their masts. A shelf of coral skirted the island all the way around, so to reach it, we had to drop anchor far offshore and launch the rowboats. While the crew unloaded the chicken coops to make room in the boats, I leaned over the bulwark, watching speckled fish nibble our hull. Behind me, I heard the slow click of expensive boots drawing closer. I knew it was Rian even before I turned to bow. "Good morning, miss," I said, trying not to sound too happy to see her again. But she looked just as happy as I felt. "Good morning, Sai. Let me guess, you're looking forward to going ashore?" I nodded. I'd give 3 of my toes just to step on dry land. She tossed her hair back and laughed. "I know the feeling. Speaking of toes, make sure you stay on yours when you get there. The markets of Pattaya Island are full of people who will try to scam you out of all your pocket money." "Aren't you coming too?" Rian shrugged and shook her head. "We're not stopping for long, so I'd rather leave space in the boats for others more eager for the break, such as your Mapmaker, for instance." She nodded to Payoon, who stood near the sailors lowering the rowboats. He tapped his eyeglass case impatiently, as if it were a pocket watch. Rian leaned closer to me and whispered, "Why do you think he's in such a hurry to get ashore? Maybe he has an old girlfriend to see." We both giggled. "Have fun, Sai," Rian said, patting my arm. "Tell me what you buy in the market, and don't let anyone swindle you." We bid our good days, and I joined Payoon in line for a place on one of the rowboats. The disgraced sailor with the bun stood apart, flanked by 2 officers. Ever since her punishment, she had been kept in the brig, a cell down in the ship's hold. She looked pale and thin, and her clothes were filthy. Captain Sangra stood at the head of the line, perfectly still and straight-backed as always. But from this close, I could see the muscles in her jaw bouncing as if she were grinding her back teeth together. One finger rested on the bulwark, tapping out an impatient tempo. When the first rowboat was ready, she leaped down to take her seat. What could she be so anxious about? "All right, Sai, our turn," said Payoon, waving me toward the second rowboat. "Stay with me and follow my directions while we're here. This will be a quick trip, just long enough to take on fresh water, and I don't want you getting left behind." I climbed into the boat after him, gripping the side as it rocked on its ropes. We weren't the only ones excited to leave the ship. As the rowboats raced one another to shore, the crew belted out sea chanties that reminded me of the songs played on the Rooster Room's piano. In the boat beside ours, Greeb's face beaded with sweat as he worked the oars. I'd give him this much: he was a strong sailor. The other rowers were all older, but it was thick-shouldered Greeb who set the pace, pulling his boat through the water with ease. A fleet of stingrays glided under us as we neared the shore and the rickety shacks of Pattaya town. The buildings were made from driftwood and old boat planks, held fast with rusted nails or lashings made of coconut fiber. "The whole place looks like it would fall over if you sneezed on it," I said. "It's sturdier than it looks," said Payoon. "Pattaya Island is full of surprises, as you'll soon find out. Your parents sent you with some spending money?" "Of course, sir," I said, frowning to think of my empty pockets. "I promised to buy my mother a souvenir." "You will have plenty of options," said Payoon. "Here we are." Our boat skidded up onto the beach, and I jumped out. As soon as my feet hit the sand, I fell over. I got back up, but it felt like I was still bobbing up and down on the sea. I reached out for Payoon's sleeve. "Steady now," Payoon laughed as he helped me to stand. "You've earned your sea legs, and they aren't so easy to get rid of. Just try to keep moving and keep your eyes distracted. It shouldn't be too difficult in a place like this." The crew had rushed off to find their own distractions, and I followed Payoon through the sandy streets of the town. Open front shanties sold everything from pearl-handled swords to tea infused with real gold. You could buy shot and powder in one store, then go next door for a foot massage. I'd always thought the markets in An Long were lively, but they were nothing compared to this place. People crowded the street and leaned out of windows overhead. I spied every shade of skin from the deepest brown to the palest pink, burned to red by the brutal sun. The customers and shop vendors shouted at one another, speaking in Mankan and a jumble of other languages I didn't know. Men and women bent over open fires or carts, selling fruit I'd never seen, making soups and stews right there in the street, and grilling every kind of meat imaginable skewered on sticks. My stomach grumbled miserably, and not just from the smell of good food. This would have been the perfect place to jump ship on the return journey home if I still had my tin of money. My savings would have gone a long way here, and mud wouldn't have found me in 1,000 years. Payoon pointed up and down the crowded lane. "You have a wander around these stalls and find your mother something nice. I have an errand to attend." "No, it's all right, sir," I said, shoving my hands into my empty pockets. She wouldn't go for these trinkets. I'll save my money for the next port. I started to follow along beside him, but he stopped me with a firm hand on my shoulder. "You can't come to Pattaya and leave empty-handed. Here." He gave me 3 leks. "At least have a bite to eat. My treat. Try the roasted octopus. It's a local delicacy." "Oh, thank you, sir." "Wait right there for me," he called over his shoulder. Clearly, Payoon didn't want me to come with him wherever he was going. Curious, I followed him from a distance and watched him disappear through the doorway of a faded blue shack. From my lessons with him, I could tell the shop's sign was written in Pramong. I couldn't read the words, but the open palm painted on the window told me what sort of place it was. I smiled, shaking my head. No wonder he wanted to get rid of me. The logical Master Payoon was visiting a fortune-teller. I left him to his superstitions and wound through the narrow streets, following the smells of roasted garlic and fried fat. Vendors waved this or that elixir or trinket in front of me as I passed. "Limes and wort to fight off scurvy," shouted one. "Sell your teeth, make some coin," called another. 30 leks for the front uns, 25 for the back." An old woman wearing a faded Mankan navy coat stepped into my path. "You're part of the prosperity crew," she said in a rasping hiss. "You'll need one of these where you're going." She dangled a cluster of necklaces in my face. The pendants, rounded triangles the size of a baby's hand, rattled against one another. "Dragon scales," said the woman with a sneering smile. "Picked straight out of the Harbinger Sea. They'll trick the beasts into thinking you're one of their own." "No, thank you." "Or maybe you'd fancy this instead." She reached into a pocket of her skirt and held up a thin disc of lemon-colored glass. I stumbled back in shock. My first thought was that she had robbed Payoon and stolen his eyeglass. But that couldn't be possible. "Where did you get that?" I demanded. She laughed, baring her rotten back teeth. "It's a dragon haw." She tapped her finger to the corner of her eye. "The beast's inner eyelid. Very rare, very precious." The woman held the glass between us, scanning me with her magnified eye. "They say a dragon haw shows you the true nature of a thing. Dragons can look through it right to a man's very heart. Maybe you've got a sweetheart, You want to know if he loves you back? This eyelid will show you the truth when you look through it. I'm selling it cheap today. A discount just for you." She held the lens out to me. I ran my thumb along the edge, entranced by how much it looked like the one in Payoon's case. It was as thin as an onion skin and glowed in the sunlight. Suddenly, a giant of a man with no shirt on barreled past us down the alley. We both had to leap out of his way to keep from getting trampled. The woman's necklaces clattered onto the dirt, chipping at the edges. She shook her fist at him, shouting, "My dragon scales! You'll pay for that, you clod!" "Dragon scales, my hind," boomed the man. "Don't let her scam you, girlie. The woman's got the finest turtle shell dragon scales you ever seen." He laughed as she cursed him, gathering up her wares. I took the opportunity to get away. A scam. Of course it was. I laughed at myself for nearly believing she was selling actual dragon parts. Even if she was, I had much more important things to spend my money on. I was determined to fill my belly before we left, and not with an octopus tentacle. I picked out a food stand selling golden rice with nuts and ginger cradled in bowls made from carved-out pineapples. The smell made my mouth water. It was midday, and dozens of other people were waiting in line for their lunches. I stood with them, trying to hold my ground and not get skipped. As I finally neared the front, I felt a slight flutter on my right side, just below my hip. Most people wouldn't have even noticed. But most people didn't have a world-class pickpocket for a father. I shot my hand into my pocket and grabbed a thin wrist. When I turned around, I twisted the rough-skinned hand in the opposite direction. There were my coins, right in the center of the palm. A wiry boy with a mop of thick black hair grimaced at me from under the brim of a straw hat. "Grummet," he whispered. "Let go of me, you soggy dangle of dog dung." I took back my coins, but held tight to the boy's hand. "Not until you apologize for trying to steal them from me," I said calmly. A man standing beside me turned toward us. "What's going on here?" His eyes grew wide as he realized the situation for himself. "He's gone and picked your pocket, has he?" "Tried, anyway," I said. The boy jerked to get out of my grip, dropping his hat to the ground. "Let me go, vulture turd!" He seemed about my age, but I was bigger, and I held him tight. The boy swung his foot straight into my shin, the kick landing right on the bone. I winced and let his wrist go, bending to clutch my leg. The boy took off running. The man standing beside me pulled out a whistle and started tweeting it shrilly. Immediately, 2 men in dusty red uniforms pushed through the crowd, nearly tripping right over me as they ran after him. There was more shouting from people on the sides of the street, a scuffle, and then the crowd parted to let the 2 men back through. They dragged the wiry boy between them by his arms. They stopped in front of the man with the whistle, whom I guessed must also belong to the ragtag police force. "Is this the one?" the police asked the whistle man. "That's him." He pointed to where I knelt in the dirt, hugging my shin. "Tried to pick that one's pocket, didn't he, child?" I looked up and nodded. "Come on, little rat," said one of the police to the boy. "It's the courthouse for you." The boy kicked his legs so they had to carry him with his feet off the ground. "Filthy oblasos! Mulsat!" he shouted at them. "Curse all you want, urchin," said the policeman. "The language won't sway the judge." The boy turned and glared at me as they dragged him away. "You're a filthy snitch! I hope you rot in a grissus for 1,000 years, snitch!" The people around me helped me to my feet and let me go to the front of the line. I bought my pineapple rice and ate it in a quiet corner of the street. I knew I should have been enjoying it, but it had no flavor on my tongue. The word snitch had stung me hard. Mud had brought me up to believe that ratting someone out to the police was the lowest thing you could do. He'd gone to jail enough times to know that sending someone there was serious, and he'd never once given the police a tip to lessen his sentence, even if it meant his only daughter had to wait in the girls' home while he served out his time. Loyalty, Si. Even a dog knows how important it is. I didn't owe that kid any loyalty. He would have robbed me clean and not felt bad about it, but I still didn't feel right about getting him in trouble. I didn't even want to think about what jail was like on that island. When Payoon found me, he was in a hurry. "Ah, there you are. Did you eat?" "I did, sir." "Good. Let's get back to the prosperity before they leave us." We hurried to the beach where we met up with Captain Sangra and some of the crew, just boarding the last of the rowboats. Sangra ran her finger inside her jacket collar to loosen it, revealing a flash of gold at her neck. I guessed that must be her lineal. Only members of the royal family were allowed to wear lineal necklaces. They were also the only ones who had enough links to circle their necks. Sweat dripped from Sangra's temple, and she looked ill. Whatever she'd seen or eaten during her excursion to Pattaya hadn't been good. I wondered if she was about to throw up over the side. Payoon, by contrast, was beaming. As we rowed back to the ship, he hummed softly to himself, looking fondly at the island. I wanted to laugh. Had he really visited a fortune-teller, Or was Rion right, and he had seen an old girlfriend? Our boat reached the Prosperity's shadow, and the crew on board began to haul us back up to the deck. As they leaned over the side to pull us up, it became clear how they'd spent their pay on the island. Tortoise-shell dragon scales swung from their necks, catching the last rays of the sun as it hurried away to light up the other side of the globe. "Say goodbye to the peaceful waters of the green sea," said Payoon. "From here we head south, and our journey truly begins."